Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Parama Talks. I'm Geeta, the founder of Parama Naturals, and your host this evening. In line with our philosophy of integrated wellness and holistic healing, we started this conversation or the concept of Parama Talks, which was supposed to be conversations to help us make informed decisions in self care and well being. Physical, mental, and emotional aspects are all interconnected, whether it is as per the Ayurveda concept of Panchakosha or it is as per the Western concept of psychosomatic diseases. We're conditioned from the time we're babies of the need to conform or meet expectations of people around us, even more so in the traditional Indian context. Over time, with our own ambition setting in, we have expectations from ourselves too. Comparison with others, especially when you are in a competitive setting, the way it is there in schools and colleges and even at the workplace. And of course, comparison vis-a-vis achievement of our own goals. Are we falling short? Are we matching up? And there is a constant aspect of self-doubt which creeps in. Am I good enough? Our thoughts and emotions influence our behaviors and actions. And these in turn affect our mental and physical well-being. We don't even realize how these kind of self-doubts lead to stress. And that stress actually leads to disease. Dis-ease or being uncomfortable initially, then actual diseases, especially those like allergies, stress-related diabetes or hypertension. And many of them finally get externally manifested in skin issues like hair loss, persistent acne, or even graver issues like eczema. It's my pleasure in this context to introduce you all to Dr. Ramya Ranganathan, an adjunct faculty at IIM Bangalore, a life and executive coach, an entrepreneur, a doctorate from the London Business School in organizational behavior, a management graduate, and an engineer, a yoga and a meditation teacher. She has conducted programs at over 50 companies and impacted the lives of thousands of people. The list of her accomplishments is long. In short, she's a person accomplished on so many fronts. I first came to know Ramya as a co-entrepreneur. Over this time, I have resonated a lot with her on aspects of people development and wellness, especially the mind-body connect. Ever since we have discussed, hi Ramya, and welcome to this session of Parama Talks. Ever since we have discussed this topic between you and me, I've actually been wanting to play the devil's advocate. It is so easy for you to say I'm enough after being so accomplished. So why did you start thinking about this aspect?
Okay, lovely. So Geeta, since both of us are from IMA, let me start with a 2x2 here. A sense of I am enough, a sense of I'm not enough. And on the y-axis, you can have achievement or accomplishment, low and high. And let me tell you, there are all 4 boxes that we can play with. So I'll take my own example. Yes, in the eyes of the world, I do have, certain degrees and tick marks that would count as achievements and accomplishments. Some of them, I have chased them, I have sought them, I have desperately wanted them. And I've done that search, that journey from an internal place of I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I need to prove to others that I can also do it. I need to prove that girls can get into IIT. I need to prove that I can land this job. I need to prove that I can get an IIM tag. And it is one kind of operating in the world. It's a valid way. I've known lots of people, students, clients, friends who operated from that mode, and I've been there, done that. I still go there, and I still do that in some facets of my life. Think of that as one kind of a journey. There are also places and spaces in my life where I've got the same tick marks or what the world calls achievements, but going from a place, not from a place of I'm not enough, but just from a place of I want to explore this. I'm curious. I want to understand this better. This looks interesting. Let's just try it out. And that's how my PhD came about, in a field that I had no previous background, nothing in it. And I was really curious to understand the relationship between human beings and their work, because I was having a very unhappy time with my work. And I was like, hey, if I need to live and I need to work, and I'm having such a miserable time, I really want to understand why we work at all. Just went in with that question. There are other things. We talked about yoga, we talked about meditation, all of that entire journey and a bunch of other healing modalities, everything was just from a place of how can I make things better? How can I follow a natural call or intuition or question or ask? Not coming from a place of I'm not good enough and I need to fill it up, therefore I can show it to someone else or prove it to someone else or even prove it to myself. Now, again, this mode of operation also works. Now, the lower quadrants, the other quadrants are also there. There are places, again, where I've not done well. So I've failed quite miserably in some of my jobs. I've failed in other contexts of my life also. And where the accomplishment and achievements have not been there. And even those can be categorized into, there are enough times when I've been going from a place, I need to prove it, and yet I fail. I don't manage to achieve it, and I don't manage to prove it. And there are places where, I'm sort of feeling good and I'm not doing anything. And therefore, I'm not the expert or the most well-known person in those fields and spaces. And therefore, from the eyes of the external world, the accomplishment or achievement is not there. So this entire playing field is there. So the correlation and the belief that a lot of us hold that the way to accomplishments and achievements has to be driven by that sense of I am not enough is totally flawed. And if there's one message that I can get out to people, that's the myth that I want to bust. So is this good, or do you want me to give you more examples?
No, I'll have lots of questions. So you can drop your examples wherever. I'm sure it's a continuum. So but then, so how? So when you talked about there is no concept of this, I am not enough, right? Or this, and everything is I am enough. But how do people cope with this, especially those who don't have so many accomplishments and where they are struggling? They struggle, whether it's in school, they struggle in college, they struggle at the workplace, they struggle in relationships. All of us want to be, very often, all of us want to be this perfect idea of something that we have in our own minds. So how do those people, or how do all of us actually say that we are enough? Where do we draw this line? Like you said, there are things where you're curious about, you want to achieve, you want to show, you want to prove. And that to me signifies ambition, also a self-desire, something we have come onto this earth to achieve. What is it that we are going to achieve when we traverse this whole journey? Are we just going to be like animals? You're born one day, you eat so many years of stuff and then you die? Or is there some inner drive for each one of us? And everybody's drive might be different, but how do we strike that balance between stretching ourselves to perform better versus accepting ourselves in our own skin and taking that time pause to be in the moment, to celebrate, to not put ourselves up?
So this drive, this impulse, this ambition, right? I'm going to put it into two categories. One is growth, and with that comes excellence, mastery, all of that. That's where you're driven internally, with the curiosity, with the desire to, hey, how can I create the next version of myself? Okay. As opposed to the other bucket lies the proving. Like we prove hypothesis. So I need to prove to other people. I need to prove to my parents. I need to prove to my neighbors. I need to prove to my teachers, my batchmates, and I need to prove to myself. So wherever the proving agenda comes in, that's when you can be assured 99% of the time, when we have a proving agenda, underneath that is a hypothesis that I'm not good enough unless I can prove otherwise. And therefore, I need this, I need to show this, I need to do this. And it can come not just about a CADs and job. It's like, I need to prove that I'm a good enough mother by baking a lot of cookies, by taking my kid to all these classes, by making sure I spend at least 4 hours playing with my kid, making sure I read these books, whatever it is, right? I need to prove that I'm a good enough daughter. And it can come in all the contexts, life and work. So proving starts with a hypothesis, and that's important, that I'm not good enough and I need to prove that I'm good enough. In the growth model, the pure growth model, the starting hypothesis itself is I am enough. And that's the topic of this talk. I am enough. Start with that hypothesis. And let me tell you why that's actually not an unnatural hypothesis for us. When we're born, if you look at any baby, before the baby gets competitive with a sibling, or before the baby goes to school and people want the baby to show them, sing in front of the aunties or show the report cards, before people want to prove, babies, tiny babies, when they're lying down, they're like filled with the sense of, I am so cool, I'm so awesome, I'm enough. And that's the I am enough platform that we're born with. So operating from the hypothesis of I am enough, we can still grow and we can still shine brighter. We can still become better. So the analogy I'm going to use here is a tree or a plant. So when the plant is growing, I love nature. Every stage is beautiful, right? A tiny plant is beautiful. The sprouting is beautiful. Sense of I am enough. But that doesn't mean it stops there. It goes further, not to prove that it can grow taller, but because it's in its nature to grow. And then the buds come, and buds are beautiful. And then the buds flower, and then they turn into fruits, right? So it keeps getting into the next stage of blossoming, but without a need to prove. So those are the two categories. And so to answer your question, for anyone who's struggling, I say it's actually a binary switch. And although I say it's work in progress, it's binary switch in each facet and area of our life. So for example, if you think you're not good enough unless you don't make this much money, come into this and say, I am good enough. And therefore, from this place of good enough, I will learn. If you're struggling with, I'm not a good enough mother unless I do chuck that whole proving, agenda, switch here. No questions asked. I start as I'm a good mother. That's it. I don't doubt it. And because I'm a good mother, now what will I do? And I do the things that I feel inspired to do, that my heart leads me to. And achievement can come from the heart space also. I think it's actually way better when it comes from there.
Oh, that was a lovely analogy. I mean, I think at least 10 questions that I can think of in this little, few minutes of whatever you've spoken, many more. But okay, fine. But let me stick to broadly the agenda. So since we were looking at that from a wellness space, I wanted to try and understand. So in the case of a plant, they know what is their dharma. It's the plant's dharma, right? For us, it's very difficult to know because there are so many other, we think too much, right? And we get conditioned so much by things around, by what we read, by behaviors around, everything. So how do we, now I'm not getting into how do we understand what is our dharma, because that's a totally different topic altogether. Let me just stick to this basic thing. How do we build resilience in ourselves that we don't succumb to this pressure? And what is the right stage? At which point in time do we kind of tell ourselves back, push ourselves back, I'm enough, push our parents in early childhood, maybe push our parents or siblings, I'm enough, don't push me. To yourself at a later point in time, you say, I'm enough, don't push yourself. Because at every point in time, like you said, you want to prove, at every stage you want to prove. And the higher you keep going to prove, and at some stage, you will reach a stage where you don't land up accomplishing what you don't accomplish. So in my mind, the analogy is you go at a higher level in a building and then kind of fall off, right? So how do you, talking with the plant, when the plant is tender, it won't break. By the time it grows up really big, the trunk is solid, and any kind of a push can actually break it down. And that's what happens in the mental space. So how do we build that resilience as we progress in life?
Yeah, so great question. Okay, so I'll address the first part of your question first, which is when is the right time to stop pushing, right? Now, and this is my personal opinion here, I want to let you know that even in the realm of behavioral psychologists and coaches and counselors, we have the entire spectrum. People who will really say, no, you need to push, and people who are like, just let the kid be, just let the person be and do what they want. So here is a model that I like to always use. There's a comfort zone, there's a stretch zone, and there's a frustration zone. And this model is applicable for kids, for adults, for Olympic sportsmen, for yoga teachers, for intellectual achievements in studies, for sports, for everything. So when we're in our comfort zone, we're not really doing anything. Okay, we're just operating within what we've done, and we're actually there. When we're in the stretch zone, so I know you do yoga as well. So that's when, you let's say you've extended in a particular asana and you go a little millimeter more, and that's where you feel all the juices inside. You feel the energy circulation, and that's where you get the maximum benefit of that asana on that particular day for you. So if you're playing badminton at a certain level or playing Sudoku, right? And this is where you are, and you just stretch yourself a little bit, and that's where you come alive, and that's where you grow. So this stretch zone is where we grow the most, we learn the most, and we improve. Now, imagine that this is the level, and then you try to, okay, yoga, you try to stretch beyond one, you'll break your hands and legs, and I've done that again. I've had a fracture trying to do Padmasana, okay, pushing myself very early in my career. Same with, you've seen this in sports, you see this in school all the time, and we see this in the corporate world also, right? This is the ability, you put a goal, and you're in the frustration zone. When you're in the frustration zone, you're stressed, you're anxious, you have all the stress hormones kicking in, the fight or flight, the adrenaline, the cortisol, it will still drive you. It might create a certain category of results, but both you and me, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners knows, it's not a very sustainable form of performance. So our body, our mind, we ourselves can be in the stress zone, but only in buckets. And then we need enough time to recharge, recuperate, and we pay a price. So my answer to your question of how much you push is push ourselves and others to go from the comfort zone into the stretch zone. Now, that said, I think as adults, we need to do that. But for kids, the really young kids, little older kids, once they have their iPhones and gadgets and all, I think we still need to push them, because that'll be another talk, but the addictive nature goes against their intrinsic nature. But if you go to the really tinier kids, they naturally push themselves out of the comfort zone. Like imagine telling your 4-year-old, beta or beti, it's a holiday, be comfortable, sit on the sofa whole day. No. The kid is like out, right? Stretching themselves, learning new things, picking up things, tinkering, learning, curious. So it is actually in our nature, without any external pushing and priming, to go from comfort to stretch. But if you see that that's not happening, I think it's totally okay as a parent, a child, a coach, a caregiver to push into the stretch zone, ourselves and others, but not into the frustration zone, because that's where the damage happens.
Okay, so here's the challenge. I mean, but at some point in time, the switch happens, right? This whole thing of the comfort zone by Csikszentmihalyi was also about the flow, and I really strongly believe in that concept, and I think that is where we are constantly working on. But so when this switch happens, and you said it leads from the stretch to the frustration zone, and that frustration obviously is stressful. What are those telltale signs that one can detect in people? How can people see it in themselves? How can they see it in their children? And how early can we detect these signs?
Very early. So this can be done at a micro level. Okay, so I'm glad you brought up flow because I love the concept of flow. Built a lot of my work in organizational behavior on flow as well, related to work and careers, and it applies, as you know, in all areas of our life. So so here's the thing: frustration. How do we know that we or someone else is in the frustration zone? How? Because they're frustrated. The emotions are the giveaway here. When we are in the stretch zone, when we are in flow, we're not frustrated. We're turned on, we're alive, we're attentive, we're focused, but we're not frustrated. We're not going, we're not crying, right? So here's the thing about emotions. Of course, this is a whole big topic on emotions. And we're not going into all the details of EQ, but one thing that we often forget about emotions, that among all the other roles that they play in our lives, good and bad, nuisance and constructive, they are also great indicators. So it's like the petrol gauge on our car. So imagine you're driving your car and your fuel tank is showing low, 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 low. Most of us would say, okay, it's an indicator that it's low. What can I do to fill it up? I need to take some corrective action or related relevant action, if you don't like the word corrective. But when our emotions are going frustrated, anxious, can't stress, that's an indicator. That's an indicator. So just like if your fuel, you don't keep driving when the fuel tank is low. So it's an indicator. If it's happening to your kid, it's happening to you, whatever, take note of it. And then ask, now what? Am I pushing myself too hard? Is this way beyond what I can handle? And take the corrective step, or take whatever step needs to be taken. Take a break and come back. So literally using our emotions itself as indicators. And that's a gift. So these, I'll leave it there. So basically, negative emotions, I know they cause a lot of, damages, but they have their gifts. And one of the gifts they bring is that they're indicators. They're telling us something. Don't continue along this path in this particular way. Do something. And either you change course or you pull back, take a break, rest. You need it. Your body needs it.
So I'm going to come back to this point actually about the parent and the kid, because I think a lot of these aspects of, again, pushing and stress happen at a very primordial level from a very early stage in life. And parents themselves work from their own recordings that they have grown up with. So I was pushed, I was told I was lazy, because I think we are also transforming as a society from a very command and control society to a much more laissez-faire. But of course, the balance is in between. Like you said, it is, you can't let it all go loose also. It's like, somebody saying, I have the freedom, so let me drive in India on the right side of the road, for instance. I need to have the freedom. But there has to be some structure as well. So at the point in time that one is trying to deal with their own mental blocks, and you have to be assessing your own children so that you don't, pass the baton of this stress and be part of that. How do you work on, or how does somebody work on themselves and for others?
Wow. Okay. I love this question. So I'm going to tell you an incident from my life. Okay. So every summer, me and my sister, we get together, except the COVID summer, of course, in my mom's house, and we have a summer vacation. So I have a son and she has 2 kids, approximately the same age. So one evening we were all at there, and, there was a bit of, stuff happens in family, and some, kids getting scolded and all the drama and stuff like that. And I forget exactly what it was, multiple people shouting at multiple people. I shouted at my kid as well. And then I told my mom, you know what? I shouted at Siddharth and I need to take a time out. And there's an upstairs, everyone was down, and I went up to take a time out, because that's the practice that I'd always been following with him. So when he was born, I took it by default that my brain was more messed up than his. And when I am stressed, when I'm anxious, when I'm losing my cool, and I know this actually because I study the brain. And by the way, we all operate from our reptilian brains when we're under the fight or flight. We're not thinking the best. We're not making the best judgments. We're saying mean and nasty things. We will do others. We're not the brightest part of ourselves. So the things that I say at that time are not the best. So my first response is it's like the mask in the airplane. I need to manage my stress, my being in the frustration zone first, and then come back and do whatever damage control I need to do, and then think about what really is the best for my son, right? And it might involve a timeout for him also, but very often, believe me, 90% of the times it hasn't, and actually hardly. Most of the times it's just involved a kind of conversation, but from a calmed place. So when I did this, my sister's kids got very surprised, and they actually went to my mother and asked, and she told me this later. She was like, why is Ramya Masi taking a time out? Because when kids do naughty things, isn't the kids who always get timeouts? And I never realized that, I totally switched that equation around. Even now, that's the way it is. So my approach would be, in general, I know it's a generalization here, but I do think that because most of our mess up, we're all messed up inside. Maybe I'm more messed up than the rest of you, but my mess ups come out very big in places that are very sensitive, and parenting is a sensitive space for me. So I'm way more, I think we should handle our stress, do whatever you need to, tapping, EFT, deep breathing, just going for a walk. There are multiple ways where within a few minutes, you can actually get out of that stress, come back, and then see if the child needs course correction. The child might, and the child might not also.
So I loved your small tips on how to deal with this, at least at the nascent stage. Are there some more practical tools and tips to actually deal with the specific thing of I am enough and working on them? Is like you mentioned about EFT.
Yeah.
Is there like a chota thing that we can look at doing, or is there some reads that you can recommend that we can work on? But what happens is that this space is very vast, and different techniques work for different people, definitely. But if there are some quick, like some quick remedies or something that, okay, fine, let me just pause and give, like for me, what works is a self-affirmation sometimes, or a little meditation or something, or a little walk. When I'm in this mode that, okay, fine, let me just, like your time out, I go for a little walk or something. So I will leave it to you to
So affirmations work for me also, because, and for those who don't know what it is, really our brain is running on a bunch of software, like programs, right? So we have, and we call these mental models. So I am not enough is like a mental model. It's like a virus with all these variants. I'm not good enough at this. I need to therefore prove I'm good enough. I'm not a good enough mother. So it's all these programs that we have there. So think of the antidote to the solution consists of both deprogramming and reprogramming. So the deprogramming is, how do you do deprogramming? You can do it in multiple ways. One is just, it's called cognitive therapy. You just ask questions. You investigate the truth of it. Is it really true that I'm not a good mother? Is it really true that I'm not good if I don't get into this college, right? And most of the time when you really question it, our rational brain itself can help us in cutting through the lies, because we've just been following it, right? We've just been picking things up and we've just been going. So that's a way to actually ask questions. Is it really true? Okay. Another way is, of course, there are therapies. I mentioned EFT briefly. It's about tapping on certain points when the emotions related to those beliefs and thoughts come up. There's hypnotherapy. There are energy tools, something called a clearing statement. And these are all methods of deprogramming that we can use for these not good enough beliefs. For the reprogramming, exactly what you said, affirmations, which means how does our brain learn anything? Neurons that fire together, wire together. That's what all the advertisers keep doing, right? To make us believe all the things they want us to believe. They just show it to us again and again and again and again and again. So it becomes really strong. So I can't show you my mirror now because it's behind the computer, but on my mirror, I've actually written, I am enough in big red. So every time I look at my face, my own face in the mirror, it's behind, I am enough, okay? So I know I get teased a lot by, people who say like, oh, okay. But that's what it is. It's really telling my brain every time I am enough, full stop. No need to prove, no questions. My brain is just reinforcing it. So whichever way, some people like to listen to affirmations when you're sort of sleeping or between wake and sleep, and do it whichever way you works for you. Some people like to breathe in and breathe out with affirmations. That's also very powerful, because there's actually something that's happening with the breath and the body and the way energy is flowing around. And if you add your, mantra or chanting there, it's very powerful. So add this affirmation along with whatever other chants and mantras you want to play. Think of it as a self mantra. So yeah, Geeta, that is what I would suggest.
I mean, the self mantra has been working for me for a while now. I mean, every time I feel overwhelmed, and I feel overwhelmed trying to juggle, and I'm sure this is happening to most people around, and especially to moms, especially to women, especially to people who have many roles to play, men too, who are playing the role of a son, of a spouse, of, the breadwinner. It's true for everybody. So at some points in time when I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I have this visualization that I have, I'm the earthly incarnation of goddess Shakti, okay, of Ma Durga. And I have these 10 arms with me, and each one has a different weapon in it. And that weapon is there to, whether it is to work on destroying some of my own negative thoughts, or whether it is to overcome some goal that I have. But basically, I have equipment and weapons. And therefore, I had never thought about it in this concept of I am enough, but it used to be more like self re-energizing. And so I think this whole concept of I am enough, and I love that idea of writing it on the mirror for a daily dose of this, or every time you look at it. But thanks so much for sharing your perspectives. I really love the frameworks, so anecdotes, and then putting it in a framework, which really helps us, our overthinking minds, to learn how this, at a cognitive level, how our own minds are working, and to put that lagam, jaise bolte hain usko lagam, to rein it in. I think that is extremely important for reining in the monkey mind.
Yes. So Geeta, when you're talking about reining in the monkey mind, right? So, so one of my favorite quotes from the Bhagavad Gita is how our mind can be our own best friend and our worst enemy. And I just got a, immediate connection to that. Exactly. So when our mind is telling us, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, that's actually when it's working as our worst enemy. And we want to start allowing it to work as our best friend instead, and rein it in.
Thanks so much for all the clarity of thought, for candidness about sharing your own journey and your own self-doubts, and especially, in search of your own identity. I resonated so much with it, and I'm sure many will do. And as a small token of appreciation from Parama Naturals, there's a little gift box for you of daily essentials for skincare and wellness. And in my whole idea that everything is combined, these two work on different fronts on the mind-body connection through their aromatherapy, through the Ayurveda, inspiration, and yet to dovetail into our daily modern lives. So, and thank you so much to all the participants for attending this session. Do share with us some of your own interesting nuggets and learnings from your journey, so that we can help to take some of your thoughts and ideas and build them up into sessions which can have a footprint, or reaching out to other people who might be afflicted with similar issues. And I just want to make a small announcement that this is the last session of season 1 of Parama Talks. We are going to take a small break, and then we will be back. Jaise how Ashok Kumar used to say, break ke baad hum log वापस आएंगे. Tab tak, do sign up for our newsletter on the website, paramanaturals.com. Subscribe to our newsletter, to our YouTube channel, and follow us on the various social media platforms. like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, to stay tuned. And for those of you who want to know more about many of the things that Dr. Ramya shared, she has a website, craftingourlives.com, where she has made available lots of open source and free information and many tools for you to embark on this self-healing journey for yourselves, or at least to explore more. And have a lovely day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.